The hall was packed. I stood near the back, gripping my bag so tightly my fingers hurt. At the front of the room, under bright spotlights, a massive board had been set up for the Chamber of Commerce unveiling. I stared at it, and my stomach dropped. It was my Harborview renovation plan. Every detail. The skylight grid, the pedestrian bridge, the waterfront market layout, all mine. I had spent 7 months on it, sketching late into the night, running numbers until my eyes ached. But the name printed in bold across the top was not mine. It was Carol's. My stepmother stood at the podium in a cream blazer, smiling like she had just saved the town. "This vision came from my heart," she told the crowd. The mayor clapped. The audience followed. My husband, Kevin, standing just a few feet away from me, joined in. I leaned toward him and whispered, "She stole it." "Kevin, that is my work." He stiffened without looking at me. "Not now," he muttered. "Don't embarrass the family." I pressed my lips together and forced a smile. But I was not afraid. Not even a little. Because I already knew something Carol did not. I had proof. My name is Nina Caldwell. I am 34 years old, originally from Savannah, Georgia, and I now live in Harborview, Oregon. Before we go further, if you enjoy stories about truth winning and justice being served, please subscribe to this channel. There are many more coming your way. Now let me take you back to where all of this really began. 3 weeks before that night, I had sat at Carol's kitchen table with my design drafts spread out in front of me. I remember the afternoon clearly. The sun was low, throwing warm gold light through her bay windows. Carol had made coffee and sat across from me, nodding slowly as I walked her through each section of the plan. "Nina," she said, tapping the page showing the skylight grid. "This is remarkable. Where did you even come up with this?" "Just a lot of late nights," I told her, smiling. She asked detailed questions. How were the structural loads handled? What was the budget breakdown for the waterfront section? Where did I find the contractor? I answered everything happily, glad to have someone who seemed genuinely interested in the work. "Let me introduce you to the right people," she offered. "I know the chamber committee personally. I can get your name in front of them." I was grateful. Carol and I had never been especially close. She had married my father when I was 19, and our relationship had always been polite but careful. I thought this was her way of finally building something real between us. I thought she was helping me. I did not realize she was studying me. And then I remembered something important. I had emailed her a full copy of the plan. That email was about to become everything. The night of the unveiling, I did not sleep. I sat at my laptop in the quiet of our kitchen while Kevin slept upstairs, and I started pulling everything together. I opened the state grant portal first. 2 months before the chamber event, I had submitted my Harborview renovation proposal through that system. I had registered it under my full name, Nina Caldwell. It had been reviewed, time-stamped, and confirmed. I still had the confirmation email sitting right in my inbox. I also had the early cost estimates I had requested from a local contractor named Tom Briggs. Tom had come out on a cold Tuesday morning in February to walk the Harborview waterfront with me. He had measured distances, taken photos, and sent me a signed estimate later that week. His invoice had my name on it. The date was on it. I printed both documents and placed them in a clear folder. Then I took a slow breath and logged into the grant portal to check the status of my submission. I expected to see it right where I had left it, sitting in the review queue, waiting to be considered. Instead, what I saw made my hands go completely still. The status column next to my proposal showed 2 words that I had never typed, had never meant to type, and had never agreed to. Withdrawn by applicant. I had never withdrawn anything. I read those words 3 times, convinced I was misunderstanding something. Withdrawn by applicant. I had not withdrawn my proposal. I had not logged into that portal since the day I first submitted it. I had not shared my login details with anyone, except for one moment weeks ago when Carol had asked for access to my shared draft folder. "Just to look over the formatting," she had said sweetly. Fresh eyes never hurt. I had thought nothing of it at the time. The shared folder held early drafts and notes, not the portal login itself. But the portal and the draft folder were linked through the same account. If she had looked around long enough, she could have found her way in. I clicked the withdrawal record and scrolled down to the activity log at the bottom of the page. There it was, a timestamp for the withdrawal, along with a small detail that most people might overlook entirely. An IP address. Every time someone logs into a system and makes a change, that system records where the action came from. The IP address attached to the withdrawal of my proposal was not one I recognized. It was not my home internet connection. It was not my work computer. But I had a strong feeling I knew exactly whose network it was. I wrote the IP address down carefully on a notepad and closed my laptop. I had a plan forming. The next morning, I waited until Kevin had finished his first cup of coffee before I said anything. I did not want to fight. I just wanted the truth. I sat across from him at the breakfast table and placed my folder of documents between us. I explained calmly what I had found, the withdrawal, the IP address, the fact that my proposal had been removed from the system without my knowledge or consent. Kevin's face was hard to read. He looked at the documents, then at me, then back at the documents again. "Nina," he said carefully, "Carol is not that kind of person. You might be reading too much into this." "Kevin, someone logged into my account and withdrew my submission. I did not do it." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he said something that changed everything. "She did ask me something a few weeks ago," he admitted, not quite meeting my eyes. "She asked whether you had actually filed anything officially yet. She said she wanted to know if there was still time to put together a joint presentation." "What did you tell her?" He set down his mug. "I told her I didn't think you had filed anything yet, because you hadn't shared those details with me." The room went very quiet. He hadn't meant any harm. I could see that on his face. But without knowing it, he had handed Carol exactly the green light she needed. I made a decision that surprised even me. I did not call Carol and accuse her. I did not post anything online. I did not go to the mayor's office demanding answers. I had learned over the years that the loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful one. Instead, I started attending every public town meeting about the Harborview renovation project. I sat quietly in the rows of folding chairs, took notes, and asked questions when the floor was open. Technical questions. The kind of questions only someone who had actually designed the project would know to ask. Can the presenter explain the load-bearing calculation for the skylight grid? I asked at one meeting, my voice polite and even. Carol's smile flickered. She gave a vague answer that did not quite add up. What is the projected drainage solution for the waterfront market section during heavy rain months? Asked at another. She stumbled. She looked at her notes, shuffled papers, and gave an answer that directly contradicted what was written on the board behind her. I saw people in the crowd exchange glances. An older man near the front furrowed his brow. A woman in the third row leaned toward her neighbor and whispered something low. They were noticing. Not dramatically, just quietly, the way people notice when something does not quite fit. Then the mayor made an announcement that changed everything. A public design showcase would be held next month. Finalists would display full blueprints. News of the showcase spread quickly through town. Within days, Carol was already talking about it at every social gathering she attended. I heard about it from 3 different people before I saw her myself. She was telling anyone who would listen that she planned to unveil Phase 2 improvements at the showcase, a brand new section that would expand the scope of the original design. The first time I heard that, I actually laughed quietly to myself. Because here was what Carol had not thought through. My original plan had been built carefully around the specific conditions of the Harborview waterfront. The soil reports, the tidal patterns, the pedestrian traffic data. Everything held together because I had researched it deeply over 7 months. Phase 2, as Carol was describing it, did not exist. I had never designed a second section. There was nothing waiting to be revealed. She was going to have to make something up. And when you make something up that has to fit with real structural data, real budget numbers, and a real physical location, the cracks appear very quickly to anyone paying close attention. Carol's confidence was her biggest weakness. She believed she had already won. She believed the showcase would be her moment of complete triumph. That overconfidence was the door I had been quietly waiting for. I decided to submit my original plan independently. I spent 2 evenings carefully organizing every document I had. The time-stamped grant portal confirmation, the signed contractor estimate from Tom Briggs, the email from Carol complimenting specific elements of my design, my original drafts with all metadata intact, and the notarized concept sketches I had brought to a notary public 3 months earlier, back when I had first begun thinking seriously about submitting the plan. I had been careful from the beginning, not because I expected anything like this to happen, but because keeping good records was second nature to me. I had worked in urban planning and community development for 9 years. Documentation was part of how I thought. I compiled everything into one organized packet, printed clean copies, and made 2 digital backups on separate drives. Then I submitted the full packet directly to the review board chair, not through the general portal, but by hand, addressed personally to him. I included a short cover letter that was calm, factual, and to the point. It listed the facts. It made no accusations. It simply stated that I was the original author of the Harborview renovation proposal and that I was providing documentation to support that claim. I did not mention Carol by name in the letter. I did not need to. The documents spoke clearly enough on their own. 2 days later, my phone rang. The board chair's assistant was calling. He was requesting a private meeting. The meeting was held in a small conference room on the 2nd floor of the Civic Building. The table was dark wood, the chairs stiff, and the window blinds half closed against the afternoon sun. I arrived 7 minutes early and set my folder on the table in front of me. 3 board members came in, followed by the chair, a serious, quiet man named Mr. Hargrove. He shook my hand, sat down, and got straight to the point. "Miss Caldwell, we've reviewed the materials you submitted. We'd like you to walk us through them." I did exactly that. I started with the notarized sketches, which showed my early concepts with a date stamp going back nearly 8 months. I moved through the contractor correspondence, the grant portal confirmation, and finally the email chain with Carol, where she had asked detailed questions about design elements she later claimed to have created herself. I spoke slowly and clearly. I kept my voice level the entire time. This was not the moment for emotion. It was the moment for facts. The board members exchanged quiet looks as I placed each document on the table between us. When I finished, Mr. Hargrove folded his hands and looked at me for a moment. Then one of the other members said something that sent a chill straight through me. "Miss Caldwell, when the other presenter submitted her proposal, she stated clearly that she had no collaborators on this project. No collaborators. Not one." The moment I got home from that meeting, I called Tom Briggs. Tom was a straight-talking man who had been doing structural evaluations in this region for over 20 years. He did not exaggerate. He did not sugarcoat. He kept clean, detailed records. He was exactly the kind of person you wanted in your corner when the truth needed to be confirmed by someone with no connection to the drama. I explained the situation to him in plain terms. My renovation proposal had been presented by someone else as their own original work. The board was now conducting a review. I needed him to confirm in writing what our professional relationship had been and when it had started. Tom was quiet for a brief moment. Then he said, "So someone took credit for work you paid me to help evaluate?" "That is exactly what happened," I said. "Nina, I will write whatever you need. I have the invoice, the site visit notes, and the photos from that Tuesday morning at the waterfront. Every single item has a date on it." Within 24 hours, Tom had sent a formal written confirmation directly to the board. His letter stated clearly that I, and only I, had hired him, briefed him on the project, and paid for his structural evaluation. The invoice attached to the letter was addressed to me. The board now had independent, third-party verification. But Mr. Hargrove called to let me know they still needed one more thing. They needed undeniable public proof. I went back through every email Carol and I had exchanged over the past several months. Most people do not think carefully about what they write in casual messages. They fire off compliments and comments without realizing those words can be read again later, with very different eyes and a very different purpose. Carol was no different. I found the thread easily. It had started the evening after I first showed her my drafts at her kitchen table. She had emailed me to say how impressed she was, and over the following 2 weeks, we had exchanged several messages as I refined the design. The details she praised were specific. She mentioned the skylight grid by name. She commented on the waterfront drainage approach. She asked a follow-up question about the pedestrian bridge weight limits. And in one message, one I had to read twice because I could barely believe she had actually typed it, she wrote, "I'd never have thought of the skylight grid. That's the part that makes the whole thing feel alive." I sat back in my chair and stared at those words for a long time. The skylight grid was the centerpiece of the design. It had been the single most discussed feature at the chamber unveiling. And now I had Carol's own words, in writing, saying she never would have thought of it herself. Then I noticed something else. Something even bigger. I opened her public press release and began reading it carefully. I placed two documents side by side on my desk. On the left, my original proposal summary, written 8 months ago, before I had ever shown it to Carol, before any of this had begun. On the right, the printed transcript of Carol's public speech from the chamber unveiling. I started reading them together, paragraph by paragraph, line by line. My stomach tightened with every passage. Whole sentences matched. Not similar sentences, identical ones. The phrase, "a waterfront that breathes with the community," appeared in my proposal on page 3. It appeared in Carol's speech almost word for word. The budget framing I had used, describing the phased approach as investing in layers, not all at once, was in her speech too, delivered as though she had come up with it in a quiet moment of personal inspiration. The metaphors were the same. The structure was the same. Even the order in which the ideas were introduced followed my original document almost exactly. This was not inspiration. This was not coincidence. This was copying, plain and straightforward. I printed both documents, marked every matching passage with a yellow highlighter, and added the comparison pages to my folder. I had spent weeks working quietly behind the scenes, building a case layer by layer, the way you build anything that needs to hold up under real pressure. Now I understood something with complete certainty. The truth could not come out quietly in a conference room. It needed to come out at the showcase. I contacted Mr. Hargrove's office the following morning. I asked a simple, direct question. Could I register as an independent presenter at the public showcase, representing my own consulting firm, and display my Harborview renovation proposal as a separate submission? There was a pause on the line. Then his assistant said she would check and call me back. She called back that same afternoon. The answer was yes. The showcase was open to community members and professional consultants. My firm, Caldwell Community Design, qualified. I was approved as a separate finalist and given a display space on the main floor. Carol's name was not mentioned anywhere in my registration paperwork. My entry appeared simply under Caldwell Community Design, with no reference to any other presenter. I did not make any announcements. I did not tell Kevin. I did not post anything anywhere. I simply confirmed my space, ordered my printed display materials, and began preparing the booth. The documents would be mounted clearly on clean white panels. The timeline would run left to right across the display. The key email excerpts would be framed. The highlighted comparison pages would be in a protective sleeve. Anyone who stood in front of my display for 2 minutes would be able to follow the full story without me saying a single word. I had been approved for 2 full weeks before Carol found out. I still do not know exactly how she heard. But 2 days before the event, she was waiting for me in the parking lot of the Civic Building. And she was not happy. She was standing beside her car with her arms crossed when I pulled into the lot. I recognized her posture immediately. The stiff shoulders, the tight jaw. She was working herself up to something and had been standing there waiting for me. I parked, got out, and walked toward her at a normal, unhurried pace. I was not going to rush and I was not going to slow down. "Carol," I said, nodding slightly. "What do you think you're doing?" she said. Her voice was low but sharp, the way a person sounds when they are trying to stay quiet but are actually furious inside. "I am presenting my work at the showcase," I said simply. "You are trying to embarrass me. You are trying to tear down everything I have built." I looked at her for a moment before I answered. "I haven't accused you of anything publicly. I filed my proposal independently under my own firm. That is all." She stepped closer. "Do you have any idea what this will do to the family? Do you know how this looks?" The mention of family was meant to shake me. I could feel her reaching for the old levers, loyalty, guilt, the idea of keeping things peaceful for everyone's sake. "I know exactly how it looks," I said quietly. Her eyes searched my face, looking for doubt, looking for the version of me who would back down to keep things smooth. She did not find it. And in that moment, for the first time, I saw something shift in her expression. She was scared. That evening, Kevin was waiting for me at home. He had clearly spoken with Carol before I arrived back. He met me at the door with that look I had come to know over 3 years of marriage, the one that meant he was trying to figure out how to say something difficult without starting an argument. "Nina," he said carefully, "Carol called me. She is very upset." "I imagine she is," I said, setting down my bag. "She says you are going to make a scene at the showcase and humiliate the entire family." "I am going to display my work," I said evenly. "The same work I spent 7 months creating. That is not a scene. That is the truth." Kevin sat on the edge of the couch, rubbing the back of his neck. "She is asking if you would consider withdrawing, just for the sake of peace. Handle it quietly through the board, without the public event." I had been expecting this moment. I had thought carefully about what I would say when it arrived. I sat across from him, looked him directly in the eyes, and spoke clearly. "Kevin, I am not withdrawing. And I need you to understand something important. If you stand beside her publicly at that showcase, if you attend and support her display while mine is right across the hall, then you are not standing with me. I need you to choose." The silence in the room stretched long and heavy between us. The morning of the showcase arrived before he gave me his answer. The civic hall was laid out in a large, open floor plan with display booths arranged in 2 long rows facing each other. I arrived early. My display had been set up the evening before, clean white panels with mounted documents, a timeline running left to right, the highlighted comparison pages in a protective sleeve, and Tom Briggs' written confirmation framed in the center. My original proposal was displayed in full, printed large enough to be read clearly from several feet away. Across the hall, Carol's booth was bright and professionally designed. She had hired someone to put it together. The visuals were beautiful. Rich colors, bold lettering, elegant fonts. It looked like something out of a design magazine. Mine looked like evidence. As the hall filled with visitors, people moved naturally from booth to booth. I stood beside my display and answered questions quietly when asked. I did not point across the hall. I did not draw any comparisons out loud. I let the work speak for itself. But the work was speaking very loudly. Visitors would look at my display, nod slowly, then drift across to Carol's. Then they would look back at mine, then back at Carol's again. I could see the confusion settling on their faces, that slow, dawning recognition that these 2 plans looked almost exactly the same. And then the whispers started. A woman with a notepad and a press badge moved through the crowd, pausing at each booth longer than any ordinary visitor. She was a reporter, and she had noticed. The Q&A session began at 2 o'clock. The moderator opened the floor, and for the first few minutes, the questions were general about timelines, community impact, and funding. Carol answered them smoothly, leaning into her prepared responses with practiced ease. Then the reporter raised her hand. "I have a question for the presenter of the Harborview renovation plan," she said, looking steadily at Carol. "Can you tell us specifically when you began developing the skylight reinforcement concept? That's a distinctive feature of this design, and I'd love to understand where it came from." Carol smiled. "Of course. I began developing that concept early in the process around," she paused for just a fraction of a second, "around last November." Something tightened in my chest. My notarized concept sketches, sitting in my display booth right across the hall, were dated September. 2 full months before November. I raised my hand. The moderator nodded to me. I walked forward calmly, reached into my display folder, and held up the notarized blueprint with both hands so the date printed at the bottom was clearly visible to everyone in the room. "My name is Nina Caldwell," I said, keeping my voice steady and polite. "I am the independent presenter at booth 12. I have a notarized concept sketch for the skylight grid dated September of last year, 2 months before the date just mentioned." The room went very still. Mr. Hargrove had been standing near the side wall for the entire session. I had not coordinated a specific moment with him. I had simply submitted my documents, told the truth at our private meeting, and trusted that the board would handle things properly when the time came. But he had clearly been watching the room with great care. He stepped forward now and gave a quiet nod to a technician near the back. The technician moved to the audiovisual panel. 2 large screens on either side of the hall flickered on. What appeared on them was not a promotional image or a logo. It was a side-by-side document view. My original proposal on the left, Carol's submitted version on the right. Key passages were highlighted in yellow. Matching phrases appeared in parallel columns, lined up for everyone to see at once. Below the documents, the metadata was displayed. File creation dates. The grant portal submission timestamp. Excerpts from the email thread between Carol and me. Tom Briggs' signed confirmation letter. The entire room went quiet in the way that only happens when something genuinely unexpected appears in front of a large crowd. People were reading. I could see their eyes moving carefully across both screens, line by line. Then a man near the front, a city planning committee member I recognized, turned toward Carol's booth. "Ms. Carol," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the hall, "did you collaborate with this individual on your proposal?" The question hung in the air. Carol stood very still behind her display table. I watched her face move through several expressions in the space of a few seconds: surprise, calculation, something that might have been fear, and then a kind of hardening. The same hardening I had seen before, when she made up her mind about something and refused to step back from it no matter what. "No," she said clearly. "I did not collaborate with her. This is my original work." A murmur ran through the crowd. I said nothing. I did not move. I did not react. I had prepared myself carefully for exactly this moment. Mr. Hargrove stepped forward again, this time holding a single printed page. He walked to the nearest microphone stand at the side of the room. "Before we continue," he said calmly, "I would like the room to see one document included in the independent submission from Ms. Caldwell." He held the page up so the screen camera could capture it. It appeared enlarged on both display screens almost immediately. It was Carol's email to me, dated the evening after our kitchen table meeting. The final line, rendered in large clear text for every person in that room to read, said, "I'd never have thought of the skylight grid. That's the part that makes the whole thing feel alive." The sound that went through the room was not dramatic. It was quiet, almost breathless. Then someone near the back said, softly but clearly, "Oh my." The mayor had been sitting in the front row for the entire session. He had said nothing since the documents appeared on the screens. He was a careful, measured man, the type who thought before he spoke, which was one of the main reasons this community had trusted him for years. He stood up now. The room settled immediately. "This showcase was organized to celebrate the best ideas for our community," he said slowly, choosing every word with deliberate care. "What we are witnessing today raises serious concerns about the integrity of one of the submissions before us. Given the evidence that has been presented, it would not be appropriate for this board to continue endorsing the disputed proposal until a formal review has taken place." He looked toward Mr. Hargrove and gave one firm, quiet nod. Mr. Hargrove addressed the room. "Effective immediately, the submission presented under Carol Bennett's name is suspended pending a full ethics committee review. No endorsement, no funding consideration, and no further public presentation of that plan will move forward until the review process is complete." The hall broke into a low wave of conversation. People turned to their neighbors. A few people began typing on their phones. Carol stood motionless behind her display table. Her jaw was tight. Her hands were at her sides. And then, as if she had only just fully processed what had happened to her, her composure cracked. Her shoulders dropped. Her eyes went wide. But she was not done yet. She was about to make one final move, and it was the worst one she could have chosen. Carol found the microphone before anyone could stop her. She did not shout. That was the strange thing. Her voice was controlled, almost rehearsed, the way someone sounds when they have practiced what they are about to say many times in their head. "I want everyone in this room to understand what is actually happening here," she said, looking out at the crowd. "This woman has been trying to undermine me for months. She is bitter. She has fabricated this so-called evidence to destroy my reputation and force me out of this process. The room was very quiet. I heard Kevin shift somewhere to my left. I had not noticed until that moment that he had moved from the back of the hall and was now standing just a few feet away from me. I did not look at him. I kept my eyes straight ahead. She hired a contractor under false pretenses, Carol continued, and is now using him to support her story. I let her finish. Then I turned and made a quiet gesture toward the side entrance. Tom Briggs walked in. He was wearing a collared shirt and carrying a folder, and he looked entirely unimpressed by the drama filling the room. He walked to the nearest microphone, cleared his throat, and looked out at the audience calmly. My name is Tom Briggs. I am a licensed structural evaluator. I was hired by Nina Caldwell in February. I was paid by Nina Caldwell. I have the signed contract and the cash check to prove both. He placed his folder on the table directly in front of Mr. Hargrove. Kevin was standing close enough that I could hear his breathing change. After Tom spoke, the mood in the room had shifted completely. The crowd was no longer whispering. People were watching, reading the screens again, thinking through what they had just seen and heard. I finally turned to look at Kevin. His face had changed. The careful, caught-in-the-middle expression he had worn for weeks was gone. In its place was something simpler and harder to look at, the face of someone who was seeing something clearly for the very first time. I watched him replay things silently in his mind. The question Carol had asked him about whether I had filed anything officially. The way she had described the plan at the unveiling as entirely her own vision. The way she had always been warm and reassuring whenever he raised any doubt about anything. He was understanding, slowly and completely, that Carol had used him. She had not just used his casual answer about the filing status. She had used his trust, his desire to believe the best of the people he cared about, as a tool to make her plan work. When our eyes finally met, he did not say anything. He gave me one small, tight nod. It was not forgiveness. I was not asking for that. It was not a promise. I did not need one right then. It was acknowledgement. He saw it. He understood. Then Mr. Hargrove straightened at the front of the room. The Ethics Committee will convene this week, he announced. A public ruling will follow. Carol's hands, I noticed, were gripping the edge of her table very tightly. The Ethics Committee met 3 days later. I was not in the room for the deliberations. That part was private. But Mr. Hargrove had told me in advance that the committee would review all submitted documentation thoroughly before making any public statement. I spent those 3 days doing ordinary things. I went to work. I made dinner. I took long walks along the Harborview waterfront, sometimes stopping to look at the places my design had described. The spot where the pedestrian bridge would cross, the open plaza where the market would be, the angle where the skylight grid would catch the afternoon light and scatter it across the pavement below. I had fought for this. Not loudly, not recklessly, but steadily, patiently, the way you fight for something you actually believe in. On the 4th day, the committee's ruling was published online. Carol Bennett was formally removed from consideration for the Harborview renovation project. The official language stated that her submission had been found to contain material misrepresentation of authorship and that providing false information to a public review board was a serious violation of committee standards. My original proposal was reinstated. That evening, the board convened a vote. I did not watch the clock. I did not pace the floor. I sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, and waited. Kevin came in and sat across from me. He did not say anything. He just sat there, which was exactly what I needed. The call came at 8:17. The vote was unanimous. The winning proposal was mounted the following Friday morning. The Civic Building had a wide lobby with a long display wall that the chamber used for honored projects, community achievements, award recipients, things the town wanted to remember and celebrate. My Harborview renovation plan was placed there, printed large and framed properly, with my name in clean, clear letters across the top. Nina Caldwell. Caldwell Community Design. I stood in front of it for a long, quiet moment before the other guests arrived. It was the same wall where Carol's name had been displayed the night of the unveiling, in those bold letters under the bright spotlights, while she spoke about her vision at the podium. The same wall where I had stood in the back of the packed crowd, gripping my bag, forcing a smile, feeling hollowed out. Now it was different. Quiet, solid, and true. Mayor Tran came to shake my hand. "The community is genuinely grateful, Miss Caldwell," he said. "This is really good work." "Thank you," I said simply. There was a small gathering of board members and community supporters. Applause when the display was officially unveiled. A photograph for the town newsletter. And across the lobby, through the glass front doors, I saw Carol walking out alone. No one was with her. No one called after her. She moved through the parking lot without looking back, got into her car, and drove away. Then I heard quiet footsteps behind me. "Kevin." He stopped beside me and looked at the display for a moment without speaking. "Your name looks right up there," he said at last. I did not answer right away. I kept my eyes on the wall. "I owe you an apology," Kevin said. His voice was low and genuine. "Not for trusting her. I think I was just trying to believe the best of someone I cared about. But for not believing you when it mattered. For asking you to step aside. I should have stood with you sooner." "Yes," I said. "You should have." He nodded, accepting that without trying to argue around it or soften it. "I am not ready to simply move past this," I told him honestly. "I am not angry anymore. But trust is not something I can hand back in a single moment. It gets rebuilt slowly over time or not at all." "I understand," he said. "I would like to try." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I gave one small nod and turned back to the wall. That afternoon, I signed the final contract for the Harborview renovation project. I signed it independently, under my own firm, Caldwell Community Design. Not as anyone's wife. Not as anyone's stepdaughter. As myself. I had not screamed. I had not lied. I had not broken anything that was not already built on dishonesty. I had simply told the truth, carefully, clearly, and consistently, until there was no room left for the lie to stand beside it. Carol had wanted the spotlight. She just never realized it would reveal everything.